Music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello, and welcome to On the Aisle with me, Tom Alvarez. My guest on today's episode is Joe Hale, president of the Indianapolis Speedway Museum, which is located on the grounds of the world-famous 500-mile racetrack. Currently undergoing a multi-million-dollar renovation, the state-of-the-art museum is expected to open in the spring of 2025. Join me now as I go on the aisle for my conversation with Joe.
Looking for ways to save on your energy bills? AES Indiana has you covered. From smart thermostats to home energy assessments, we offer simple solutions to keep your home comfortable and your costs down. AES can help you save money and energy with kits, tips, rebates, and more. Visit aesindiana.com/ways to save to learn more about how we can help you save money. AES Indiana, helping you discover real ways to save.
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for a roller coaster of romance. Season 29 of The Bachelor premieres Monday, January 27th, and this season's got some flavor to it. Citizens of Bachelor Nation will recognize this season's heartthrob as one of the fan favorites from Jen's season, Grant Ellis. But now he's looking to see if his wish of everlasting love will be granted. With his infectious laugh and athletic prowess, this goofball is set to charm a house full of hopeful hearts. From candlelit dinners to adrenaline-pumping dates, watch as this day trader navigates the twists and turns of finding love in a mansion filled with 25 of America's loveliest ladies. Will Grant find his perfect match or end up with a broken portfolio? Tune in for the most exciting season yet of The Bachelor, starting this Monday, January 27th at 8/7 Central on ABC and available to stream on Hulu.
I'd like to welcome you, Joe. Thanks for coming on my podcast. What a pleasure to see you.
My pleasure.
Okay, we were just discussing before we started recording that, our history goes way back. I think I met you when you were on the board of Dance Kaleidoscope. Is that correct?
I was on the board of Dance Kaleidoscope a long time ago, chairman of that board for a while. Actually, when we met right down here at the Snow Row House, that's where we had our board meetings at the time.
Oh, wow.
Cherry Jaffe and Ginger Hall were the artistic leads at that time. But I actually came way before that. I think it was in 1970. Let me get this right, 5, that I became the director of the Metropolitan Arts Council, was the precursor to today's Arts Council of Indianapolis. And at that time, we had a government grant to run this CETA program. And I'm not quite sure that I remember what CETA stands for, but we actually hired 33 artists and we had them working out in the community, and that was a government-funded program. So, it was really an interesting time because they were creating art, making art in a variety of ways around the community, and so it was a really fun time.
I remember that, the CETA program. That was very instrumental in launching a lot of careers, I think.
Right.
Artists, yeah. And then you went on to do what?
Well, I moved here. I'm from Indiana originally, southern Indiana. And then
You're a Hanover College graduate.
Taught for 2 years in southern Indiana, and then moved to Germany and taught for 2 years in Germany. I taught theater at an American school in Kaiserslautern, Germany. And when I got there, they hired me to teach English, but they got there and they said, well, could you also teach a theater class? And I said, yeah, I think I can. I've been in some plays and things like that. So I said, give me a classroom, this old classroom that was unused, and they gave it to me. And so what I found about the kids in a military school is that they're just desperate to belong to something, because they typically every couple of years they're moving to a different country, a different place, and they really want to belong to something. So we created this theater program. We went out and raised money, and we built a theater, an 85-seat theater in this classroom with light system and sound system and everything. And we did 12 productions that first year. So it was really kind of fun. I loved that. I did that for 2 years, and then came back to Indiana University. I was planning to get a PhD in theater. I thought I'd teach it at the university level. that wasn't quite to my liking. And so interestingly enough, I got a job at the Indiana Arts Commission. And there was a program called Preview Performances that they were doing. It was funded by Lilly Endowment at the time. And basically we went out to every college and university and said, give me your theater, your music, your dance programs that can tour around the state. Then we went to any town that had a population of 35,000 or less people. And we said, here's the deal. We've got this catalog of performances that we can bring to your community, but you've got to book a season, and you've got to market it, and we'll pay the kids, because we thought it was important to pay the performers, the actors, the dancers, the singers. We'll pay the kids to come to your community. You've got to charge for it, but you got to keep the proceeds from all those performances and earmark those for future performances in your community. So a lot of the smaller communities were able to use the Preview Performances program to create really performing arts series in their communities. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I got a call, and a guy named Ralph Schwartz asked me if I'd come down to New Harmony, Indiana, and be the Vice President of Arts, Humanities, and Education for historic New Harmony. And that was when they were hiring Michael Graves to design the pottery and Richard Meyer to design the Athenaeum, and Jane Owen was there. And we met everybody from Buckminster Fuller to Beverly Sills to Princess von Furstenberg, when we lived in this little town of 900 people in New Harmony. And of course, Lilly Endowment had also invested heavily in that at the time. So it was a fascinating time. And then I got a call from Bill McGowan, Jim Morris, Jim Browning, and somebody else saying, would I come back and lead the city's Arts Council? So I was 27 at the time. I thought, well, this could be a cool opportunity. Loved Indianapolis, always been somewhat involved in the arts. So I came back and headed up the Metropolitan Arts Council for about 3 years. And then I had 2 little boys. I wasn't making very much money. I thought, maybe it's time to get a real job. So I'll always remember I had, I think, 17 interviews at Eli Lilly and Company. And about the last interview, they pulled out a chart. They said, Joe, we think we can make you a Lilly man. And it had my whole career on that chart. And I thought, that's kind of a depressing document there. So anyway, long story short, I got involved in commercial real estate then and worked for a developer and ended up running the Galbraith organization in Indianapolis, which built the Bank One Tower, which is now the Salesforce Tower.
Wow, that's quite a career, Joe. I didn't know a lot of that. It just validates my thinking about why I wanted you on. I knew about the Dance Kaleidoscope. I knew about your program officer at Crystal DeHaan, which must have come later, of course. Yeah. And I knew that you had a passion and interest in the arts, but I didn't know that it was that deep, Wow. So, this program, my mission is to shine a spotlight on local artists, but also I talk to a lot of national people because many of them have come through here, as you know. And
Sure.
I believe, from my perspective, having reviewed theater, dance, and music for almost 50 years, I see that there are a lot of big names that come through here, a lot of major artists, and I do think that we're an entertainment hub. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. It was interesting because when I got in real estate, I was doing that for about 7 or 8 years, and then actually I took the job I was the president of Castler and Associates. There was an incredible interior designer here in town called Suzanne Castler, and she did mostly commercial work at the time. And we had offices here in Cincinnati, and then I opened an office in Cleveland. And while I was doing that, I got involved in Dance Kaleidoscope. But during that time, I also served on the board of the Symphony and the Idle Jorg and the Arts Center and the March of Dimes and the YMCA, and got very involved in the community because I found it was very helpful in the real estate business, commercial real estate business, if you're leasing office space, to be involved in the community because you're meeting people that are ultimately running companies. They're going to need office space. So it was kind of a win-win situation. And then I was at Zubilation. Mary Claire Broadbent and I actually chaired the first Zubilation right when the zoo reopened in its current location. And I was at a subsequent one, and there was a guy gatoring in front of the band. I said, who's that? And they said, oh, that's Jim Rogers. He's the new CEO at PSI Energy. So Jim and I got to be friends, and he hired me to be head of their foundation. They wanted to start a foundation, kind of use that foundation to kind of maybe embellish their brand a little bit. So I did that. And then, of course, a year later, we announced a merger with Cincinnati Gas and Electric Company to create a company called Synergy Corp. And then we all had to move to Cincinnati, so I had to leave. And it was really interesting because I was in Cincinnati for 15 years. I ran the foundation for Synergy Corp. I came back to Indianapolis for a year. I was president of PSI Energy. I was president of Cincinnati Gas and Electric Company for a while. But it allowed me to also take a look at Indianapolis from a neighboring city. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because, everybody just, they're so entranced with the fact that Lilly Endowment here is here and what an impact that organization plays in our community. I've always likened it to having a rich grandmother. They'll give you that down payment on the first car or first house that you need to buy to make things happen. And that's really what the endowment has done, I think. I mean, my hat's off to them. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting at a meeting at the University Club, I think in 1978, and it was some of the same folks, Jim Morris and people like that. And they had this discussion. I was not in this discussion. I was sitting around the perimeter of the room at that point. But they were having this discussion about, do you really think we can use amateur athletics as an economic development tool to try to turn around this Indianapolis brand, which, as you know, Tom, at that point it was kind of India No Place and Naptown and all of that.
We had to find a hook.
And that was our hook.
Yeah.
Found it.
I love telling that story.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just remarkable. And, it used to be that there were a group of men that came together in a room and these visionaries came up with this stuff. And, everything starts somewhere. And the same group of people, wouldn't you agree, they visioned lots of stuff that's still here, right?
Well, it would have been nice to have a couple of women in that room, too, to get their influence, and their good ideas.
Of course. And that's also changed. But, we had some pretty good mayors, too, didn't we? Yeah. And how many did you directly work with during your history here?
Bill Hudnut and Steve Goldsmith. I mean, those were the two that probably I was the most involved with.
Yeah.
Because we moved to Cincinnati in about 2000.
That's right.
In 1994, and we were over there for 15 years. And, it's a very robust community, arts community over there. I kind of went from being on the board of the IRT here to being on the Playhouse in the Park in Cincinnati. But, you also saw when an arts organization is willing to take some risk. And I admired Playhouse for doing that, too. And I loved IRT. And, of course, I was there when Ed Stern and Ben Mordecai
when they first started the Athenaeum.
Yeah, with buckets on the floor catching the rain on rainy nights. I remember that very well. But, I remember at Playhouse in the Park, we decided to, John Doyle had just done Sweeney Todd on Broadway, where the actors played the musical instruments. So we said, let's do a production of Company by Sondheim and have the actors play the instruments. We had Raul Esparza come in and play the main lead. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was so well done that we transferred that production to Broadway. And what it did, it gave people in Cincinnati such pride that we actually born and bred and grew something like that, created something in Cincinnati that then moves to Broadway and is nominated for Tony Awards. And I love the fact the way the arts can be not just an economic development tool, but can really just burnish the reputation of the city as well. And I think we've done a good job here.
And of course, you were in Nantucket, one of my favorite spots in the world. I was there years ago, and the architecture and the tea roses and Sconset, that little fishing village.
Sure.
I do remember one thing about Nantucket. They had sort of that East Coast kind of attitude. They weren't very friendly, not like Hoosiers. I remember not getting, anybody said hello to me when I on a walk. They would look straight ahead, no eye contact. I thought, wow.
When we lived in New Harmony.
New England does.
That's right. When we lived in New Harmony, there was a wonderful woman, and of course her name just flew out of my head, but she had a farm outside of New Harmony in Posey County. Her grandfather was the governor of Indiana, Sinclair, around the turn of the century. He had gone out to Cape Cod, and he bought the tip of Hyannisport, the whole tip of Hyannisport. And then in I think 1918, sold a piece of that to Joe Kennedy to create what's now called the Kennedy Compound. But anyway, she had 3 houses out there on Cape Cod, and she said, would you like to use it? We didn't have much money at all, and we had these two little guys, and so we drove all night, and we stayed in one of her houses, and a guy that worked on Nantucket New Harmony with me was Rob Benchley, who it turned out Peter Benchley is his cousin who wrote Jaws, and his grandfather was Robert Benchley of the Algonquin Round Table. He said, come over to Nantucket just for a day, take the ferry over, and this is like 1978, and we took the ferry over there, and Tom, it was one of those times, and I think everybody's had them, but we got off that ferry and we stood still and looked around and we said, this place just feels right. We started going there annually. We stayed in the worst places you can imagine, just hellholes, but it was just so, we just loved being there. Now we've been fortunate enough for about 40 years to have a home there, and the kids have kind of grown up there in the summer, and our daughter was married there, and grandkids get baptized there. But it's a very special place, and I, after leaving what is now Duke Energy, I ran a not-for-profit called the Global Bright Light Foundation. We provide solar lights to off-grid families in developing countries. So I was all over the world every month, and big presence in Rwanda, Nepal, Guatemala, places like that. But after I did that, I said I'd do it for 5 years, and then I got a call about working in Nantucket for the Dreamland, which is the cultural center there. Which is interesting because now I'm at the Speedway Museum, but on my board on Nantucket was Kathy Penske, married to Roger Penske, who now owns Speedway. So, it's like 6 degrees of separation in some ways. One thing leads to another, always.
Did you ever cross paths by any chance with Alan Clue? He had a place in Hyannisport?
No, he was down in Woods Hole, near Woods Hole.
Oh, Woods Hole, that's right, that's right.
Oh, Alan used to come to our Christmas parties every year, and in fact, the Alan Whitehill Clues Fund is making a major investment in the new museum because Alan actually liked cars a lot,
That's wonderful,
too.
but was he a donor at the Dreamland, too?
No,
okay.
The mainlanders stay on the mainland.
Oh, really?
The islanders stay on the island.
That's
we
really
have this huge rivalry with Martha's Vineyard. That's the rivalry.
Interesting. In fact, my first trip out there started in Woods Hole. Took the ferry to Nantucket, spent a week, and then went to Martha's Vineyard.
Oh, did you?
And toured all the towns. Being from Indiana and the Flatlands, I was always intrigued by New England. And back then, when I first went, there were still wooden signs.
Still are.
Yeah.
Our house is called Hale and Hardy.
Oh, really? So you mentioned Speedway Museum, and that's another reason I wanted you here to tell us where you are. How long have you been the executive director? When were you appointed? You're president. You're president and CEO, is that correct?
4 years this month. Or 4 years, this month. Been there that long. Mark Miles is an old friend, and he had called me and said, would you think about coming home? And I had just told the Dreamland, I said, I'll do 5 years there, but I think it's good to move on, get somebody else in place. So I was kind of thinking, what do I do next? And I don't play golf. I'm not going to retire. So Mark called and said, would you want to come back and take a look at this museum? And I said, well, I've been to the 500 a lot of times, but I said, I'm not a car guy. And he said, that's okay. We need somebody that can help us raise money, that knows the community somewhat. And, the museum really hadn't changed since it started in 1976. My first week, I spent the week just on the floor talking to guests. And it's interesting, Tom, because 80% of our guests come from outside of Indiana, 20% of those come from outside of the United States. So it's really a international market that we deal with. But there was an older couple, and they were standing there around some cars. I said, well, what do you think? And the guy said, I am in my happy place. I could be around these cars every week. Each one has a story to tell. It's wonderful. And I turned to his wife. I said, well, ma'am, what do you think? And she said, do you really want to know? I said, yeah, please. She said, to me, this looks like an indoor parking lot set in a middle school cafeteria with books on the wall. And I said, well, ma'am, I don't know if that's the tagline I'm going to use for a new museum, but I think you kind of nailed it. You walked in and you saw the whole place. There was no path to follow. There was no storyline to follow. There was nothing for kids to. If a kid came into that museum, all they heard more than anything else was, don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that. So I thought this is a real opportunity to rethink this place from top to bottom. So I called a buddy of mine from Cincinnati, a guy named Jack Rouse. He ran a company called Jack Rouse and Associates. It's called JRA now. They had done Well, they've done Kings Island, but they also did the Volkswagen Museum, the Volvo Museum in Europe. There are a lot of major museums, not just car museums, but they've done some. So it was during COVID, and it could have been 4 years ago today because it was a freezing cold day. And Jack drove over from Cincinnati. Everything was closed. We sat in the car with the windows down, eating at McDonald's for lunch. And I took him, I walked around the museum. He said, I think there's a lot of potential here, but boy, it's going to have to be a top to bottom renovation. And so that's when we started this process. And I don't know if you remember, Tom, but in the past, some of the coolest cars were in the basement, but nobody was allowed in the basement.
Yeah.
So when I got there, we weren't losing money, but we weren't making any money. And I thought, how can we make more money so we can afford to do a feasibility study to see what we're going to be able to do and raise, what this building can accommodate? So I said, let's open up the basement. And they said, oh, we can't do that. No one's allowed in the basement. I said, well, some of the coolest cars in the world are in the basement. Why not? Well, we never have. I said, let's do. So what we did, we took about half the cars out. We replaced all the burned out lights, put a couple of really cool cars on kind of spotlit podiums. We said we'll allow 6 people at a time to go to the basement. It's docent led. It's 30 minutes. We're going to take away your phone so you can't take a photograph, and it's $150 a person. Well, that first year, we made $400,000 in new revenue from the basement collection tour. So that allowed us to then start having some conversations with Lilly Endowment. And we needed to do a feasibility study. They said, we'll give you some money, but you got to match it. So we used that money that we're making to match it. And that's when we came up with this plan to build the new museum. Now, Roger Penske is our landlord. We are completely independent from the 500, from IMS. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people said, well, gee whiz, let Roger Penske pay for it. He is our landlord. He doesn't charge us rent. He's a benevolent landlord, but he has nothing to do. We're a separate 501c3. So we put together a plan and went around, visited museums all over the place, both car and regular museums. And we came up with a plan and we said, okay, it's going to cost $64 million to strip this place bare and start over again. Roger said, we talked about putting wings on, going up. He said, nope, you got to stay in the footprint. You can't go up, you can't go out, but I want you to double the museum size. I thought, well, that's a challenge. So what we ended up doing was we opened up the basement now. It's part of the museum. You don't pay extra to go down there. We punched a hole in the floor, so there's a grand staircase going downstairs. But we also found there was enough room above where we had this winning car collection to go up another 20 feet. So we've also added a mezzanine level that adds another 7,000 square feet. So in essence, we've doubled the exhibition space without going up or out. So we started raising money, and the endowment was incredibly generous, and they were very helpful early on. Our board, phenomenally. So the bottom line is, on an $89 million campaign, $64 million is going to the new museum, $10 million is going to go for an endowment, $15 million will go for a new restoration shop where we can store 150 cars that we don't have room to show. We can it's going to have a restoration bays in it. It's also going to have an event space that'll be built across the street. So $89 million, and I'd say right now on the museum part, we're at about 61 on our $64 million goal. We're on schedule to open April 1 of this year, and we're under budget. So things are going, knock on wood, pretty well.
Well, thinking about all the experience that you bring to the table as an administrator, as a fundraiser, being on both sides of the philanthropic stage, you were a program officer, so you know what grant makers are looking for, right?
Right.
And then I was thinking today, another reason that I wanted you on is I came up with this idea that I want to promote the connection between sports and arts. In Indianapolis, the arts community is always frustrated because sports is a huge competition, and all the brands that are in town now, the NFL and the NBA, and of course now
there's, I understand there's a movement afoot to capitalize on women's sports, because what the Fever's are doing, and this may become the women's sports capital of the United States, and it'll probably happen, I mean, right? So what do you think? Is there a connection between the sports and arts?
Well, it's interesting. In fact, I had a meeting this morning with Chip Ganassi, and Chip has a race shop here in Indianapolis, as does Andretti, as does Bobby Rahal, as does McLaren, as does AJ Foyt. Chip employs, I think, 120, nearly 200 people in Indianapolis. Average salaries maybe around $125,000. Chip says, if a kid will take the right classes in math and science in high school and do well, he said, I'll put him into my internship program, my apprenticeship program. I can teach them then what they need to know to work for me, and they've got a lucrative career. They don't necessarily have to go to a 4-year school, and they can stay in their hometown. In our new museum, we've got a designated STEAM classroom, and I wanted to make sure it was STEAM and not just STEM, because I wanted to make sure the art part of it was in there, because every race team has a legion of graphic designers in their teams that are doing the livery, doing the marketing materials and all that. I mean, that's one way that you connect them, certainly. Mm-hmm. I hate for the arts to just be an afterthought, though, when there is a sports event happening, and I think sometimes that has happened, unfortunately, rather than being involved in the early discussions, because they bring the creativity to the table.
Well, and then there's a couple things that I've thought of. The way they always invite these incredible top artists to sing at the race and to be involved in their events. And of course, the people with the checkered flag and the green flag, those are often big names in Hollywood or whatever. So there's that. And then, the sport itself. I mean, talk about theater, right? The so-called experience that everyone talks about, the huge crowd, the drama, the flyover, the balloons, Purdue, all of that is so theatrical to me. That's why I love it.
Yeah. Did you see that new commercial that just premiered this weekend?
I haven't.
With Joseph Newgarden in it.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It is phenomenal.
Tell me about it.
During the football game on Sunday night, they premiered this new commercial, and it was just showing Joseph Newgarden in all different facets of his life, making him very, very attractive, very, very talented. And then at the end, Tom Brady's on, says, "Do you really think he's that good looking?" But it's fun. It's funny. Great. But it's what motor racing should have been doing for a long time.
Yeah.
Having some fun with it all, and bringing more of the. In fact, when I met with Chip Ganassi, he'd been to a race in Southern California. I forgot where it was, but anyway, it was motocross, motorcycles, 40,000 people. He said, I didn't see a person over 40 years old. There were fireworks, there was music, there was all this excitement going on, and he said it's a production. I think they need to view it as a production now, because that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember when we had the opening ceremonies for the Pan American Games.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
Disney came in and did that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, what a show that was.
I was working at Channel 6 at that time, and I remember just how it transformed the city in so many ways, right? Yeah. That Indianapolis is also known, when the Naptown days, as having a collective insecurity, poor self-esteem about our own city. It took outsiders to make us realize what we had here. Right? Yeah,
exactly.
And I remember that it was pivotal, though. It was a seminal event for this city. Isn't that when everybody started seeing Indianapolis, the hook that we talked about?
I think it was a little before that, Tom.
Yeah.
And I think when the germ of the idea started percolating, it's actually when we had the National Sports Festival in 1982.
That's
and it was on the plaza in front of the American Legion.
That's right.
That was an incredible production, and we all went, wow, we did this?
Yeah.
And then 5 years later, you had the Pan American Games that said, look what we can do. We can make it even bigger and better. And then because we had those events, we had to build the natatorium, the velodrome, and all those sports facilities, and then that allowed us to bring in all the Olympic trials and swimming, diving, synchronized, and all of that. And that's, it took off like wildfire.
Yeah. Tell me about the museum itself. I know that you did your homework and your due diligence, and I'm sure you've talked to some of the most creative people around about the exhibit space. I love museums, and I believe that museums are definitely part
part of the arts and culture. And I just love the technology, the evolution of museums, where they've moved from the past to just sort of non-interactive, and now all of the use of video and all of that stuff. And as you know, in the theater, that's become commonplace. Use of video and technology to enhance the...
Sometimes I think they go a little overboard, but we'll leave it at that.
Really, in what way?
I don't know. I've seen some shows that I think are overproduced. I do want to focus on the acting. I want to focus on the actors. I don't want to be distracted.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm distracted.
I hear you. But, in some way it helps the budget, doesn't it? If you got a good video and you have to worry about building sets and all that.
I'm on the board of Summer Stock Stages here. And
you are?
Emily Holloway, I think, is just...
Oh, isn't she just amazing?
And now Mike, who's there with us, he's phenomenal too. But no, I have seen how video can enhance a production without overwhelming a production. And Summer Stock Stages, I think, produces some of the best musical theater.
Some of those kids are on Broadway right now.
There was one point last year in every musical on Broadway, there was some graduate, at least one graduate of Summer Stock Stages. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
But no, I'm my hat's off to.
Why were there? What's your take on the local arts landscape right now? You've been gone for a while. It's been, 5 years now? Did you keep track, or did you come back and say, oh my God, it's growing like crazy?
I kept track to an extent. I was back in Indianapolis a lot. But, I came back, the first thing I noticed were, more roundabouts than anywhere on the world. And then beyond that, I couldn't believe the number of theaters.
Yeah.
And, when I left, it was the Phoenix and it was the IRT primarily.
I think I came to you for an early contribution. I was one of the original board members of the Phoenix, one of things I'm most proud of. And, I came to you with my hand out to ask you to support the Phoenix.
I hope we did.
You did. Yeah.
But no, I guess my concern about the community today, and, I've expressed this, is I wish we had a larger corporate community that were engaged. And I know a lot of companies are, and I'm very thankful to them. But I remember when I was chairing the campaign for the new Contemporary Arts Center in Cincinnati, we had just hired Zaha Hadid, the first woman to design a museum in the United States, and we needed to raise $40 million. And Jim Rogers and I co-chaired that campaign. And I remember one day we started at breakfast, and we had 5 meetings by the time we finished lunch. And it was Kroger, Fifth Third Bank, Cintas, Western Southern, Procter & Gamble, and Federated Department Stores, Bloomingdale's. And we had raised $17 million by lunchtime. I don't know how I could do that today in Indianapolis. Now, we're very lucky to have the endowment, Lilly Endowment here, who does step in so many ways. But obviously they want others to have skin in the game too. So I guess I wish we had more depth in the corporate community. I think there's a new generation coming up.
Yeah.
I don't know that yet it's in their DNA to support the arts or support
do you
the community.
think that has to do with no one's taught them the value of philanthropy, giving?
Maybe.
Frank Basile talks about the old guard. Of course, many are still with us, thank God, but we've lost like Marianne Tobias and Crystal DeHaan and folks like that, who got it. And so you're saying we need a new generation of those folks?
I hope so. I hope they're just in the wings, waiting to go
Well, that's
on.
individuals, but you're all saying corporations need to step up.
Yeah, because, except for National Bank of Indianapolis, which is involved in so many organizations, we really don't have a locally headquartered bank anymore. And, it used to be Indiana National Bank, American Pleasure National Bank. We used to have Merchants National Bank. They were all headquarters here. They could make those big decisions here. It's not the case anymore.
Well, your interactions with the foundations over the years, so you certainly know how they operate. What's your perception of the local everyone always says, oh, we're so lucky. We've got Lilly Endowment, we've got the Clues Fund, we've got on and on Fairbanks. We have all these local foundations. What is your take on that?
I mean, thank goodness for them.
Yeah, and have they all supported the museum?
They have. Yeah, they have. They have, and we're very, very appreciative.
And especially the Lilly Endowment, I'm sure they're that's part of their mission. Community development. Do they see this as community development?
I think they like the workforce workforce development angle too.
Oh, okay.
The educational part. We've hired a terrific, very talented young man who's our head of our education program now. And it really is about training Indianapolis kids about the lucrative careers.
And how about diversity and representation?
That's a challenge. It's a challenge in this sport when you think about it.
That's intentional that you're going to be doing some exhibits on women and minorities in the sport, right?
Yeah. But you know, a woman didn't drive in this race until 1978. But in the 20s, a woman owned one of the teams, but she wasn't allowed in pit row because women weren't allowed there. So she had to send notes down with some guy to give her team directions on what she wanted them to do.
Yeah.
So we can't rewrite the past, but I think what we can do is encourage more young kids.
Weren't the Holman women though involved directly?
She had her own team.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary Holman George had her own team.
Yeah. Are you still in contact with the Holman family?
Yeah. They have been very
Are they
generous
part of the museum? I'm sure. You're doing a whole thing on them, huh?
Very generous supporters.
What else can we expect in that museum in terms of the presentation itself?
Well, it'll be very interactive, very participatory, very entertaining, but also very educational. You'll walk into a new welcome center that will kind of blow you away. From there, you'll walk down Gasoline Alley. There'll be 7 garages representing 7 different eras of the 500. They'll be architecturally correct. The cars in them will be of the era. Everything in that garage will be of the era. So you really see the evolution of design and technology as you walk down Gasoline Alley. Then you'll turn the corner and you'll be in a huge room, and there'll be an 80-foot long LED screen above you and in front of you, 20 feet wide, and that 6-minute program will let you experience what it's like to be on the starting line on race morning, from when that cannon goes off at 6 a.m. until 11:45 when they say start your engines. There'll be 3 cars in that gallery which represent the most recent front row of the 500. When they say start your engines, those cars will start up. You'll feel them rumble. Jets are flying over your head. Balloons are going off.
Cool.
Back Home Again in Indiana is being played. That's what you'll experience. Then you walk out into the atrium, and in front of you is a grand staircase taking you up to a new mezzanine, which will be an art gallery. We should be able to show things we've never been able to show before. There'll be exhibits about technology, about safety at the track, other races that have taken place there. Then you can go into the qualifying zone where you can actually have the experience of qualifying for the 500. There'll be simulators there. You'll do 4 laps and see how fast you can go to qualify for the 500. You can do what the drivers do in terms of testing their reflexes, how heavy it is to try to steer a car that doesn't have power steering, to pick up that hose to gas up the car. So you get all these experiences. Then you go into our STEAM classroom. There'll be lots of things for kids to make, see, do there. There's going to be a gallery, the Penske Gallery. Roger's going to have all 20 of his winning Baby Borg trophies in there, the uniforms of those 20 drivers, 6 of his cars. Those will be changed out. Go down in the basement. There's 2 rotating galleries down there. One of the shows that we're talking about doing is we've got this Mercedes that's very valuable, and Andy Warhol had actually done a silk screen of it. Okay. And so Andy Warhol did silk screens of cars because he also loved cars. So we're thinking about having an exhibit of those cars and then bringing the silk screens that Warhol did there. We want to do something. We have this Carracciola collection of sterling silver trophies, which is they're beautiful. They're sculptures. And I said, how cool would it be to put those in a black room, mirrored walls with just pin spotlights on those trophies? It would be, first of all, it'd be a really Instagrammable moment, and we want people to be able to spread the word. But we're just looking for really unique, different ways. We've got the car guys. We need to bring in the people that aren't car guys. And downstairs, there's going to be, winning car gallery down there. And the 17 winning cars will be upstairs. Below that will be 12 more winning cars, largest winning car collection in the world. And then from there, you can take a tour of the track, go out and go around the track, kiss the bricks, come back, and as you're leaving, you go down this long hallway. Cars are going by you 240 miles an hour. You feel wind on your face. It's like being in the race.
You just confirmed for me that there's a connection between at least racing and the arts, because this is a work of art you're talking about. I mean, it's a hybrid of film and theater and everything.
Guess how many designers worked on this building?
Really?
192 designers worked on this project.
And you got to interact with all of them.
Yeah.
Huh? Oh, what fun.
Yeah.
So are any racers involved at all?
Well, the first exhibit, but there's going to be a lot more temporary exhibits that change out 3 or 4 times
Race
a year.
car drivers, I should say.
Because in the past, something would open at the race on AJ Foyt and it would stay up for a year. So if you saw it at the race, why come back? Nothing would change. So this way, 3 or 4 times a year, we're going to change things out.
Do you have an oral history component by any chance?
Well, the first exhibition that we're going to be doing that's going to be rotating is called Best of the Best. It's on the 4 four-time winners. And there is a component of that. What I've found traveling around now and talking to donors all over the country and outside of the country is that everybody has a story about, my grandfather brought me to the first 500 in 1954. I came with my dad. Everybody's got a story. And we need to capture those stories some way. So to follow up on your point, that's going to be something we're going to be focusing on.
The Indiana Historical Society, they've been doing oral histories forever and for different communities too. So what are your figures on, well, you said percentage of people who come worldwide to the race. What about the locals?
Well, that's our opportunity, in my opinion, because my friends, when I asked them if they've been to the museum, they said, no, why? I've been there. I've been there. I've seen it. And so the perception is, if you see it once, why come back? Because nothing's going to change. There's going to be a lot changing on a every couple of month basis in the new museum to give people a reason to come back.
So you can earn income all year.
We hope so.
And it will join our illustrious museums that we already have, the Idle Joy, the IMA, NCAA. So, it's not as if we don't already have a reputation.
We're going to do summer camps. We've never done summer camps. We're going to do a lot more field trips. In the past, we didn't have a classroom. There was no place for kids to go. And now we've got a designated room, a classroom. So a lot more educational activities.
And that goes back to diversity. How will you draw folks who wouldn't consider racing because of representation? We're not welcome, or that's not part of our cultural experience. How will you draw those people? Latinos, African Americans, and such.
I mean, we were talking to a school 3 miles from the track, east of the track. And in this 4th grade classroom, I think Spanish was spoken more than English. And we asked, who's been to the who's heard of the 500? Not one person had ever heard of the 500. They're 3 miles away. So there's a real opportunity for us to expand our market.
Well, you know what? I can speak from experience because I live in Hallville. I moved there consciously because of Brian Fonseca, who started theater on Michigan Street. And he chose to buy a house in Hallville since he believed I need to do that if I'm going to operate my theater in this community. I need to be in the community, and he lured me there. And I can hear cars on the track from my backyard. I love Speedway. There's some wonderful restaurants there, and I'm blown away by all the corporate headquarters that are showing up, right? And it's transforming. So Speedway is a nugget, and with this museum, it's just you probably will see people from all over the world in those restaurants and those cafes.
Children of color, though, that's been a challenge, and there's a wonderful organization based here in Indianapolis called NXG, Next Generation. Rod Reed is the man that does this, and he's doing a fantastic job, and we're looking to work more closely with him.
Well, and again, I meant to say the whole point of that, of promoting Hallville and Speedway, which is 10 minutes away from me. All my neighbors, many of them are Latino, and they're from all over Mexico, Central America. And the whole area, Latinos are all over the city, immigrants, but in particular in Hallville, it's always been in that area. It used to be called Little Mexico over on Washington Street. So there are folks who live in that neighborhood. And by the way, many of them have been exposed to racing through their countries in Latin America. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there for the next generation. They just need to be exposed. So will you be doing any kind of outreach?
We have. Jacob Paulos is our new education director. He's been out a lot. He just went on the board of the High Performing Academy by Marian University. He ran the High Performing Academy in Decatur Township before we enticed him to come over. So we've done more so in education because we've got to look at the next generation of race fans. That's how we're going to change the complexion of the crowd, quite frankly. We can't rewrite history, as I said, but there is things we can do going forward.
No, and I'm really glad to hear that, because I think, too, then, you already have, just in the racing community, you have a heavy Latin America presence, do you not?
Yes.
I mean, South America, Mexico, a lot of those people are role models.
And you look at the visitorship after an Elio or somebody like that, or Pato, wins a race. When Takuma Sato, we had more people from Japan. It was amazing that year after he won. So it's, as I said, 20% of our crowd is from outside of the United States.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about Joe Hale, the person. Tell me about, where did all this come from? What were your influences? And what was your primary study at Hanover?
Well, I was born in New Albany, as I said. My dad was a mailman. My mother actually got polio when she was 9 months pregnant with me. So I was born when she was in an iron lung.
Really?
So one of my earliest memories is pushing her wheelchair around Scheller Lane in New Albany, Indiana, raising money for the March of Dimes, because they actually paid for her to go to Warm Springs, Georgia, which is where President Roosevelt learned to kind of recover and live independently. So she went there for 6 months. 6 months after I was born, the March of Dimes paid for it. So I felt this obligation to give back. In fact, in 2005, I decided to run 7 marathons in 7 months on 7 continents. I wanted to raise $100,000 for the March of Dimes. And then Sports Illustrated and some other things picked it up. So I ended up raising $300,000 for the March of Dimes that year, just as a way to give back. And I was serving on that national board at the time. But anyway, I was, small town Indiana, no money.
So you said New Albany, otherwise known by the natives of New Albany.
Albany. But I don't know. I was visiting a cousin at Hanover, and it was one of those things like going to Nantucket. I got on that campus. I thought, this feels right. I'm going to go here. So I Hanover College, a year in England, my junior year, came back, and then that's when I started. I taught for 2 years in Floyd Knobs, Indiana, outside a suburb of New Albany, as I put it. And then
what was that? What was it called?
Floyd Knobs.
Floyd Knobs. Yes, of course.
Yeah, sure. Suburb.
Yeah.
And then moved to Germany, and then came back to Indianapolis, and that's how it all started here.
Did you have, were there teachers that influenced you? Were there?
I was in some plays. Tom Weatherson was a great theater teacher. In fact, he just died. And then when I got to Germany after I taught for a year and created that theater program, I saw they were, every Stadttheater in Germany does opera, but then they always throw one American musical in there for the common man, I guess. So they were doing the Stadttheater in our town. Kaiserslautern was doing West Side Story. On a whim, I went and auditioned for West Side Story. They were using the original Jerome Robbins choreography, and I got cast as a jet. So I would teach all day.
Really?
I'd teach all day. We had this little baby. I'd teach all day. Then I'd get on a bus, and I'd go to Mannheim or Stuttgart, or, and we were playing these beautiful opera houses in these German towns. And, I was singing, Heute ein echter Jet ist lebendiger Swing, and Heute Nacht every night, and auf Deutsch. Because I'd had toyed with the thought of maybe this is something I want to do. Well, the reality is it very quickly became apparent that I wasn't that good. After you do West Side Story about 35, 50 times, I could have been canning tomatoes in southern Indiana for all the creativity that was involved in that. And so that's when I thought I might want to teach, came back and went to IU, and that didn't work out.
Can you still speak German?
Yeah, the score of West Side Story. If you ever need anybody to sing Tonight, auf Deutsch, I can.
So that's where your passion for the arts grew and actually being on stage.
If I can't be one, I want to be able to support
So do
them.
you still take in theater and all that? Yeah.
Very, very little in New York that I don't see. This is kind of full circle.
Oh.
I just got elected to the board of the Arts Council of Indianapolis. So, here I was 50 years ago directing it, and now I'm a board member.
That's great.
So just moved to the other side of the table.
When I asked you about the arts landscape, you talked about people stepping up to get to support it. But what do you think about the landscape in terms of, we have a lot of theater, but overall, what do you think about our arts offerings?
I, like a lot of people, I'm concerned about downtown in general and the impact that has on the symphony or the IRT or the other organizations that are downtown. I mean, I remember Bill Hudnut saying you can't be a suburb of nothing. You've got to have that vibrant core. I think the last couple of years have been tough on our vibrant core, and we need to bring that back. I'm glad to see more people moving downtown. I wish we had more businesses moving downtown and bringing those jobs with them to support more restaurants and things.
Well, I've been hearing of late, some people have asked me my opinion regarding, don't you think we need like 1,000-seat theater downtown?
Well,
what do you think about that?
Selfishly, being on the board of Summer Stock Stages, it's hard to find a place to perform if you don't have a home of your own. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I wonder how many theaters can we support in this
I'm talking about
town?
A performing arts center.
Oh, you're talking.
Do we need one in downtown Indianapolis?
About 1,000 seats. Mm-hmm. I think it could be very useful.
And what do you think about what Carmel's done?
I'm kind of amazed. Mm-hmm. It wasn't there when I left. And you come back 15 years later and you come back to that. Mm-hmm. It's pretty phenomenal. Linda, my wife, is in Florida in the winter and Nantucket in the summer. And so a lot of times I'm here and I'll go up to I'll go to the Cabaret here. I'll go up to Feinstein's up at the hotel up in Carmel. I mean, I love those intimate spaces. I just love those. Yeah. And I like the fact that we're able to bring in really some superb talent.
Well, it doesn't hurt that Michael Feinstein is the artistic director of the Center for the Performing Arts. And you know what? I think they've broken ground. They're building his
songbook,
the museum, Hall of Fame for Great American Songbook. I mean, that's going to benefit everybody. Yeah. And so, what do you think about the so-called? For a while, I don't know if it's lessened or not. The Indianapolis versus Carmel kind of thing that used to be. It used to be Greenwood versus Carmel, and now people complain about, I don't go downtown at all because of the parking, because of the crime. I don't go to Carmel because it's too far away. They're snobbish. I mean, what do you think about all that?
I think both of those arguments kind of bother me. Makes me kind of sad, Yeah. We're a metropolitan area.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a new performing facility in Plainfield. It's gorgeous. I mean,
Hendrix Live, have you been?
Yeah.
Isn't it something?
Yeah.
I mean, that lobby, it could be in L.A.
I know.
What would you say to folks about why they should take a look at not only the track and get excited about this museum that you're going to...
It's going to be a completely new experience. I had a hard hat tour yesterday. People are going to be blown away by what they see when they walk in there. There is no resemblance to what it used to be, but our mission remains the same. We called this campaign The Stories Behind the Spectacle, and we're storytellers. That's our role. And when you walk in and you see a big photograph there, and there's three people, that's obviously an owner and a driver and a mechanic, and they've just won the 500, but peeking around a doorway in the back of that photograph is a black man. And I said, well, who's that? They said, well, legend has it. I don't know, and I cannot get anybody to confirm this. Legend has it that he was the best mechanic in all of Indianapolis, but blacks weren't allowed at the track. So he would come in after dark and work all night and then leave at dawn. I don't know if that's true or not, but even if there's a seed of truth in that, those are the kind of stories we can tell to hopefully illustrate the past, but also make a difference going forward.
That makes me think, was there segregation at all, ever?
No.
No, okay.
But you know something, Tom, if you walked in our museum, if a black person walked into our museum 5 years ago, they really wouldn't see anybody that looked like them. They wouldn't see anybody working there that looked like them. So we know what our job is going forward. We're going to work hard to correct that.
What about people in general who've never been to the track in general? What do you say to them?
Please come. No, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I run into that have never, ever been there.
And what are their reasons?
I'm not interested in cars. The 500, it's too loud, it's hot. And what I say to them is that we play such an iconic role in this city and its history. I don't think we would have had the Super Bowl if it hadn't been for the 500 to demonstrate what we can accomplish as a community. I don't think we'd had all those other things we're talking about, the National Sports Festival, the Olympic trials, the Pan American Games, all of those things, NBA finals. I don't think we'd have any of those if it hadn't have been for the 500.
So it's the track that really established our brand. Yeah.
I was hiking in the rainforest in Borneo 3 years ago, and I checked into this eco lodge in the middle of nowhere, and I wrote Indianapolis down, and that woman looked at it and said, vroom, vroom. That's how she knew us.
Wow, Joe, that would make a great commercial, actually. Well, what a pleasure it is to catch up with you and to hear about the new museum. And, I just can't wait to see it. When will it open officially?
We're having for our patrons, our donors, on March 31st, and it opens to the public on April 2nd.
Will you have like a whole series of events?
We are.
Yeah?
Yeah. Anybody gives $25 or more, they get a first in line early admission kind of opportunity party. So we're still collecting money, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
We also are going to have a sale of cars that have nothing to do with the 500, Tom. And the one sale is taking place in Stuttgart, Germany on February 1st. It's a 196 Mercedes. Let me just say that a car similar to it sold 2 years ago for $148 million. We've got the last Ferrari, second to last Ferrari to win Le Mans. That's been valued at about $35 to $50 million. And then we've got 8 more that we're going to sell. These have nothing to do with the 500. The money that we make from this, now we can't use it to build a building. That's not done in the museum world. But if we can make $100 million, that will go into an endowment that will guarantee the sustainability of this museum for generations to come. And it'll allow us to buy cars that we need in our collection that we don't have right now. But unfortunately, we can't use it to build a building. But so that's why we're still raising money.
Important question. Will the museum be affordable?
Yeah. I think we're going to be charging $25, and that gets you the trip around the track too, I think.
Wow.
So, but then we've got family plans too. If you've got we have membership programs. You pay $125 for a membership, and then you get in unlimited.
And it will be open year round.
We're open more than, I think, any other museum. We're closed 2 days a year. We're open 363 days a year. Yep.
Well, can't wait. Again, thank you for your time. I know you're a busy guy with all the stuff that you've got ahead of you, so I really appreciate it. And I hope that you'll give me a tour if I get out there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Tom.
Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official neighborhood newsletter for 16 Indianapolis neighborhoods, offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.